In this video, I'll be replacing the rear hatch seal on this Porsche 944. Like the other rubber seals on these cars, the hatch seals will eventually dry out and crack over time, especially with prolonged exposure to the elements. And while I'd say the sunroof is more prone to water leaks, the hatch seals can leak as well. But a failing seal can also allow exhaust fumes to enter the cabin as they spiral up the back here, along with excessive road noise, which would warrant replacement of the seal. There are a few things to look for, so if the seal is showing signs of cracking or tears, if the rubber is hard and dry, or if the seal stays in a compressed state when the hatch is open, those are indications that it might be time to replace the seal. As you can see here, the OEM Porsche seals come with a split in the center of the seal, but the aftermarket Euro seal and the only944.com seals come as a connected loop. So there are a couple different ways that those can be installed, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the first thing we'll need to do essentially is remove the old seal. They basically just pull right off. Then we'll need to clean up all the dirt and debris that has collected around the seam. And finally install the new seal by pushing it on and working around the perimeter. This is a Euro seal, which is about a third of the cost of the Porsche seal. The Euro stuff can be hit and miss. I had a really poor experience with the Euro sunroof seal being way too thick and ended up switching to the only944.com seal, which fit perfectly. But this hatch seal has generally more favorable reviews, and I've got a number of Euro sensors on the car that are working out fine, so I figured I'd give this one a try and see how it works out. I'm going to start by removing the old seal. It just pulls right off, and work it around the support struts and the electrical connections until it's fully removed. Here's a look at the two seals side by side, OEM seal and the Euro seal. We can see that the original seal has a textured side and a little opening to push down onto the seam on the body panels, and then the softer side to create the seal. And the aftermarket one is quite similar. Has a slightly different pattern, but it does have a textured side. And there's the notch to install and a softer sealing side to go up against the hatch. The old one's still a little bit flexible, aside from the dryness and cracking on the edge that was exposed to the environment. But this new one is quite flexible and soft, so it should go on nicely. Get it all situated. With the old seal removed, you can see some of the cleaning work that needs to be performed on the body panel here. There's quite a bit of grease and baked on rubber and old adhesive all around the perimeter, so I'll work my way around with some towels and some cleaning solution and get all that cleaned up. If it's really stuck on, I've got a plastic scraper that I can scrape some of it off. And I'm going to watch out for these vinyl flaps near the top that are part of the interior trim panels, and just make sure that I don't disturb those too much because they are kind of glued onto the seam and they can tear easily because they're quite old, so just watch out for those. And once it's all cleaned up, we can go ahead and install the new seal. Once the car is all cleaned up, you can go ahead and install the new seal. There are a couple different methods you can use because of the closed loop design on this seal. One, you can leave it intact as one piece, and then you just have to account for the hatch supports and the electrical connections that go around the car. So we'd have to pop these off, disconnect the electrical cables, and make sure that this one is pushed out of the way, and then you can kind of start in the center and work it around. My only concern is this rubber grommet at the top here that feels a little dry and brittle, but this cable can be disconnected from below and pulled up behind the vinyl trim piece. There's an electrical connector for the rear wiper and the third brake light located behind the carpeted cargo liner on the left side, so just pull that back and disconnect the white connector, and then the wire and grommet can be pulled back from above. But given my experience with other crumbling grommets on the car, I think I'm going to leave that in place and just cut the loop like the factory design and route the seal behind. I haven't experienced any leaks at this location, so I don't think there's a big concern in cutting it. On the other hand, if you leave the seal intact, it could prevent shrinkage in the seal as it ages, so pick whichever method is best for your situation. This circuitry is actually kind of interesting the way Porsche designed it. So this little pin right here on the support strut is actually a switch to operate the rear cargo light. So when you close the hatch, this little plastic piece slides down and breaks the circuit on that little pin right there and turns off the light. And that circuit also runs around. Electricity travels through the supports and into the rear defroster and then back around. Also a connection if you've got the rear wiper as well. So kind of an interesting design, and I'm not going to touch it. When I first got the car, I did actually do a repair on some of the wiring, and so I'd rather not mess with it. I will leave some of this adhesive in place. It's still a little bit tacky, and I'll just give it some holding power on the top side and the outer edge, and we'll go ahead and get it installed. Well, I've got the seam all cleaned up to where I'd like it to be. All the big chunks have been removed, and I've cut the seal, and I noticed that there is some adhesive already injected into that notch, so that will save some time. So what I'm going to do is mark the exact center point of the seal and start in the center of the third brake light and push it on, working around the outside edge until it is completely installed on the cargo area. As the seal is being installed, there's no real need to stretch or pull the rubber, as there's plenty of material to make it all the way around. It pushes straight in with the textured side facing the interior of the car. When you get to the corners, you may need to rock the seal back and forth a little bit to get it fully seated. Try to make sure that those are good and tight before moving on to the next section and working down the sides. Even if you choose to cut the seal, it should come to a nice tight connection where the two ends meet right above the keyhole. And as you're finishing up, you can pull the lower edge of the seal out and away from the body so that it sits evenly on the car. Overall, the Euroseal seems to have a nice fitment to it. It was relatively easy to install, and the materials are close to on par with the factory seal in this case. The rear hatch may require a little more force to close until the seal is broken in, but after a few weeks it should form fit to the underside of the hatch.